The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
And come one, come all, welcome back. It's the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryant with you back in studio where the weather is always tweeted at 9:30 a.m. in beautiful New Brighton, Minnesota. That's a joke. If you follow me on Twitter at Jason and Bryant, you know that, bit of a weather nerd here. So back in studio, I am off the road. The last time we did a show, it was a D3 preview from Interstate 81 South with Brian Hazard. Then I released the press conference audio from the NCAA Division I Championships. And here it is, April 1st, a new month, a new series of, a season series schedule. I don't know. I'm going to do a lot of short times coming up in the next 2 months with some names I've already got lined up. And I'm working on getting lined up. Matter of fact, today, Bo Nickel of Penn State was announced as the Dan Hodge Trophy winner. Third straight year a Penn State wrestler has received said individual award, kind of the Heisman of college wrestling. I know oddly enough, there's some people that actually don't agree with that distinction because it was created by Mike Chapman in one outlet versus it being a complete creation of wrestling itself. Although, I think the fact that Win Magazine and Mike Chapman's Culture House Books has gotten the media and past winners to vote on it like a Heisman. So, and in case you're wondering, yes, I did get a vote, and yes, I did vote Bo Nickel as my Hodge Trophy winner. I went Hodge Trophy in order. I went Nickel, Nolf, and that's basically, I don't know, who was the last four? I see Yanni and Ashnault. I think Ashnault I put ahead of Yanni just because Ashnault, he torched people. But again, there were four candidates there, and Nolf and Nickel were head and shoulders above the other two in terms of their statistics and bonus point output, things of that nature. But Bo Nickel he pins people, and he's a lot of fun to watch. Nolf's a lot of fun to watch too. And, if you went Nolf, I'm not going to object to that. I just gut feeling said that Bo Nickel embodies what the spirit of the award is. I think Jason Nolf does too, but I think just a little bit more. And I'm not going to argue the nuances. I mean, they're statistically so close in a lot of different things. So gut feeling, I went with Bo. Other people that I've got scheduled. Actually, I'm working on getting Bo on the show within the next week or so. Mekhi Lewis of Virginia Tech will be joining the network on the Virginia Tech show. We had Jared Frayer on the last Virginia Tech show to talk about his response to Mekhi becoming Virginia Tech's first NCAA champion. Larry Early was on my Old Dominion show, the ODU Wrestling Monarch Madcast, also lining up Chance Marsteller and Drew Foster this week. But this show, we are going to talk with Emma Randall. She is the only gold level coach by USA Wrestling, the only woman gold level coach for USA Wrestling. She is the girls development coach at Beat the Streets, New York. Matter of fact, her actual title is girls development director. She's been at that gig just under a year, had spent time in Colorado Springs before that. We will be talking to her about the growth of women's wrestling. We'll be talking to her about her alma mater, Lock Haven, and their performance at the NCAA championships. We'll be talking to her about the Beat the Streets Los Angeles Hollywood versus Bollywood match that went on, and Team USA, just trounced India and a couple wrestlers from Mexico 8-2. Allie Reagan, Sweet 5, we'll talk about that. So Emma has a big event with Beat the Streets New York. It's not the gala. This is coming up on April 19th and 20th, the Cliff King Gotham City Girls Open. So a lot of diverse situations going on in New York City. Emma's originally from Ohio, spent time at Lock Haven, then the U.S. Olympic Training Center, has an interesting perspective on the growth of not just women's wrestling, but wrestling as a whole, and how Beat the Streets New York has she's seeing that firsthand. So that's what we'll talk about here in a bit on this, believe it or not, the 500th episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Now, it is a little funny math because there are actually, where did I write it down? I wrote it down here. So I didn't write it down very well. Let me turn the page. Oh, yes. Here are my notes, because I still write things down. I write a lot of things down. Let's turn that page. Okay, so there are actually 487 short time shows in just what is considered the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. There are another 41 that are short time shorts. Short Time Shots. And then there's one that was a short from the National Duels years ago with Heath Ethlinger. There's press conference stuff in there. At some point, I just stopped saying, all right, I'm not going to name the shows or number the shows if they're only interviews. So basically, there's 528 episodes of the Short Time Wrestling podcast in some way, shape, or form. But this is I'm labeling this one 500. So that being said, I'm not going to do a huge clip show or anything like that. Emma Randall, you're number 500. This will be her second appearance on the show, and a lot of good insight here, a lot of good information. And if you don't know Emma, she has just really been a good person for the sport in terms of being able to build and grow women's wrestling. Now with Beat the Street, she'll talk about those who led the charge before her and what she's got, and that'll come up, I don't know, right about now. Actually, I fibbed. If this is your first time listening and you like to rate, review, and do all that jazz, you can do so on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to this show by going to matttalkonline.com/listen or shorttimepodcast.com. Either of those will take you to certain ways you can get this show on Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, any place except for SoundCloud, basically, because SoundCloud sucks. So that's the only place you're not going to find my show is SoundCloud or Mixcloud, because they steal my stuff without asking. So just in case you're wondering, rate and review. If you like the show, you like what I do. The preview guide was a slam dunk. Everybody who got it loved it. So matttalkonline.com/join the team. That's how you can support this network and this program. The Little Rock Show is going to be launching soon officially. But so enough of the calls to action. If you're a fan of the show, hey, hit that subscribe button, rate, review, all that jazz. If you're new to podcasting, you might need some help on doing that. Just go to your Apple iTunes or on your computer, or your podcast app on your iPhone or whatnot, and rate and review. It's that simple. And if you know what you're doing with podcasts, what took you so long? Come on. I haven't had a review in a while. Hit me up. We'll see what happens. Now it's time to talk to Emma Randall. And I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time for Short Time. Here's that swoosh. Emma Randall, New York City now, from all the way in Ohio to Pennsylvania to Colorado. Now, Beat the Streets, New York. It's been 2 years since you've been on the show. What's it like living in the big city now?
I tell you what, there's no mountains in the distance. There's a lot of skyscrapers, a lot of honking horns, and a lot of sirens. So it's a completely different landscape, but same job, teaching single legs to kids who want to get better and get to the next level.
So quite a change from what you maybe envisioned when you first started wrestling in Ohio before going to Lock Haven. Now you're coaching wrestling in one of the biggest cities in the world, with one of the biggest rushes of potential athletes in boys and girls wrestling. I mean, what's the last year been like for you in terms of, learning the ways of New York City?
Yeah, it's been a huge adjustment, whether it's just commuting to and from work or commuting to and from a school, to interacting with so many different cultures and such a diverse population, and just different situations. These kids don't have wrestling rooms, so we're finding wrestling spaces, whether it's in a cafeteria, hallway, a gym, or just making it work with whatever resources we have. We have a ton of kids who want to get on the mat, and so providing them those opportunities, whether it's training, whether it's competition, whether it's helping them get to SAT prep or Regents test prep, which is their standardized test here in New York. It's been a huge learning curve, learning how these kids operate and what issues they have, and then how do we solve those issues, because it isn't the same as coaching at the Olympic Training Center. It's different, but in a lot of ways, we're always fighting to overcome. And how do we remove those barriers to get these kids on the mat and to really get them to their next level of success?
Without bearing the lead here, we just kind of have to backtrack a little bit. You spent some time in Colorado Springs as a national team's assistant, and then July of 2018, make the move to Beat the Streets, where you took over for Jackie Davis, who was the girls development director. So just catching up on titles. So walking into that, Jackie had been a mover and a shaker in a lot of ways and really helped things. And, when you got there, how did she set the table for you in helping, prepare New York City with more girls wrestling?
Oh, man, Jackie did a tremendous job growing wrestling here in New York City. It really starts with the work of Cheryl Long prior to Jackie, who fought for there to even be a girls' official program and an official coach. And so Cheryl really beat the trees and tried to make things happen for the girls here. And then Jackie really stepped up and grew the sport and stepped into the role as far as like getting girls onto co-ed teams. She helped start a girls only freestyle season in the spring, where our schools actually have a freestyle season where our girls can compete following the folk style season in the fall and winter. She's, grown Gotham City. She's, I don't know that there's anything that Jackie hasn't touched here. And so those are huge shoes to fill. And she did a great job not only growing those opportunities, but creating relationships with people all over the East Coast. She's truly missed here in New York City. So that was a big fear of mine. Jackie's one of my closest friends. So I knew that if I needed help, I could always call her. But yeah, she's doing a great job up at Boston and Providence, working to grow Beat the Streets up there in Youth Wrestling Boston. So
I'm glad you mentioned Cheryl Wong, because I remember one of the very first Beat the Streets. I think it was the first time we went outside to the, right there at Times Square. And Cheryl was coaching in essentially what amounted to an evening gown, because the gala was right afterwards. So, unlike, that's one of the dynamics that women have that men don't deal with, is like, you could go from a suit mat side to a suit thing. Women, you don't really coach in the same thing you can wear to a banquet too. So Cheryl's, one of her things she was talking is like, I've got to be dressed for this gala because it takes a while, yet I have to coach my girls out here in the middle of Times Square. So it's one thing I always remember about Cheryl is coaching with a gold, I believe it was a gold evening gown on, kind of in the corner, like, showing level changes in stances. And just, it's just kind of wild on how we've gone from having one person kind of beat the trees. Now you've got other people helping you out, and it's not just the men and the women. There's a bigger staff, but there's still a lot of growth from the days that you don't have to sit there in an evening gown and coach anymore.
No, we have, a ton of coaches here in the city who really make Beat the Streets possible. We have about 150 total programs. And so that's a lot of extra coaches who are putting eyes and hands on these athletes and making sure that those daily interactions are a positive wrestling experience to keep them coming back. So we no longer are screaming at the top of our lungs to come help, but we are trying to grow and get better. And how do we make Beat the Streets in New York City wrestling the best it could possibly be, and get our kids to that next success level, whether it's the state for our boys or for the national level for our girls, trying to get to the top of the podium.
Well, Beat the Streets Los Angeles just recently finished up an event on Sunday night, the Hollywood versus Bollywood, where the Team USA women beat India and a couple of imported, free agents from Mexico. And we're looking at that type of event. LA's been good with that the last couple of years. And as a former women's athlete and women's coach, it's not the Beat the Streets New York chapter, but it's Beat the Streets LA. What's it like to see those type of events, that kind of go, okay, you got the left coast with the women. We got the big gala that usually comes up this year, NCAA versus the world teamers and such. I mean, it's been something now. Both coasts are represented, both genders are represented by various Beat the Streets organizations.
I love it. Honestly, the support that Beat the Streets has provided to USA Wrestling to get these high-level matches and to draw attention to our sport in public places and venues where maybe a crowd wouldn't normally see wrestling or traditionally see wrestling, exposes people to it and continues to grow the sport. So it's great for USA Wrestling, and it's great for our kids to be able to meet all these role models and really be a part of something that's huge and moves the sport forward. So I think it's mutually beneficial. And obviously I'm loving having these women on a big stage. I think that's something that our sport has lacked for a long time, and providing them that arena is amazing.
Anything from the USA India match that jumped out at you as being awesome? I mean, let's just say Forrest Molinari and Ali Reagan doing work with. We got some big falls, got some fives. I mean, great win.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about that too?
Oh yeah, Mallory beating Sakshi Malik.
Yeah, that's a huge win for Mallory. I love that was just calm and confident and stuck to her belief in herself. A lot of times in those must-score, must-defend situations, we start doubting ourselves and we start trying to protect the lead or wrestling a little bit softer. So to see her, stay in the game and continue to attack, both when she needed to score, but also in that must-defend situation, not taking risk, but, scoring that go behind to really seal the match. Those are huge things for me, because I think that's a huge mental win. Every time that you can survive that kind of situation and really thrive in it, it's huge. And I think the same thing with Chikara, right? That girl she was wrestling has a ton of experience. She's been successful for a number of years, and for Chikara to hold her off was a good one for her too. So those are the things that stuck out to me.
Also, we've just finished up with a giant event on the men's side. It was called, I don't know, the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships. And your alma mater with a couple of All-Americans, Kyle Shoup and Chance Marsteller.
Yeah.
So when
How about that?
You're in the freestyle mine so much. I mean, how much time do you actually get to pay attention to the college scene and root for what the Bald Eagles are doing there?
I follow the nation. I follow the rise. My senior year is when Scott Moore took over, and so I'm definitely partial to that program. My college advisor was Carl Poff, like I told you before. So caring about that folk style wrestling, it matters to me. Actually, I was in Lock Haven when they wrestled Appalachian State, and I was there for the basketball alumni game because my friend was being honored. But that night we sat and watched the folk style tournament. So it matters. I don't spend a ton of time watching it. I'm definitely proud and always sharing their stuff, watching that Haven Nation grow. 6 guys qualifying for the tournament is huge for us. Working our way back to that top 10. So.
Now, when we look at what's being worked on with not just Beat the Streets New York, you got an event coming on. We'll touch on that. That's the Cliff King Gotham City Girls Open coming up April 19th and 20th. We will spend some time on that here in a minute. But before we get to that, just the last year and a half, 2 years has really been huge for women's wrestling. We've got, with what Sally Roberts is doing with her group in Wrestle Like a Girl, with what Joan Fulp and Andrea Yamamoto are doing with the USA Wrestling Committee on girls wrestling. We're seeing high school wrestling being sanctioned at the girls' high school wrestling sanctioned at the high school level. We're seeing growth in numbers in Fargo. We're seeing, grassroots places like Beat the Streets really open doors for more girls to get into wrestling, girls and boys, as a matter of fact, with these programs. And, we talked 2 years ago when you're coaching at the Cadet World Championships in Athens, Greece, about what the growth of women's wrestling has been. Now, in the last 2 years since we last spoke, since you appeared on Short Time episode 354, and by the way, this is episode 500, I hope you know. So since you've appeared 2 years ago, what have you seen change since our conversation in Athens?
Honestly, it's just the amount of girls that you see, right? And the idea that they're now chasing these dreams that I wasn't quite sure as a young girl existed for me. At Beat the Streets, we do a lot of recruiting days. And so we'll go to a school and we will teach wrestling in their physical education class all day long and just expose kids to what the sport could be in a lot of different games and just teaching them the very simple forms of staying in a stance, moving, playing knee tag, getting our hands locked around somebody, using our weight, feeling comfortable pushing and pulling on people and our balance. When I see that, these kids who've never once been exposed to it, and I see them fall in love with it on day one, and then the next time I see them at our neighborhood training centers here in Beat the Streets, that's when I see the growth. Because now I went from growing from this national level where I can see the numbers, now I see the faces, and I see the dreams, and I see those conversations that these kids are starting to have. How do I get to that next level? How do I become a part of Beat the Streets? How do I become, competitive in my neighborhood? How do I, stick out the growth? Because wrestling is not an easy sport. It's one of those things where you've got to put in the time, and there was a point where our fall athletes who hadn't quite got into the full swing of things, and they were still struggling a bit when we were doing our training camp, struggling when we were going live, and they were like, listen, I don't know how long I can keep getting beat up. And I'm like, stick it out, please. And then, the next time I see them competitive, or maybe this past weekend when I saw them win their first match, to me, that's growth, and those numbers are so powerful, and it's going to continue to grow. When I share the story about when I graduated in 2008, there were less than 10 colleges that existed. Now there's over 50. The opportunity is tremendous. And if you want to go somewhere, if you want to be part of something huge or make that Olympic team, now's the time to start that training, start to believe in yourself and give it a try. So I think that's the biggest thing to me, is just seeing all those little wins and that number of participation gains, like gaining person by person by person, and that impact just spreading and rippling out. It's an exciting time to be a female wrestler in the U.S. for sure.
You had touched on the culture of wrestling. The cultures of wrestling can be kind of, transcendent upon the actual cultures of people. I remember when I go to the past Beat the Streets events and they'd have the youth matches ahead, you'd see a lot of very familiar names based on, in terms of internationally, you'd see an Aliyev wrestle because there's an Azerbaijani, neighborhood in New York City. There's so many different cultures represented in New York City where you get those traditional names. You'll see a Georgian wrestler, you'll see an Azeri wrestler, you'll see an Iranian wrestler, and you'll see all these cultures mixing in the sport of wrestling under the Beat the Streets and in their middle school and high school programs. What's it like to go in to these cultures where they know about wrestling? Whereas, sometimes you've got, our typical American fans that may have never been exposed to it. I mean, what's it like to get a first time wrestler whose family actually knows a little bit about the sport of wrestling, but, for some reasons, gender roles the way they are overseas wouldn't allow their girls to wrestle?
Yeah, it's a tremendous head start, to walk into a school and when we ask how the point scoring system works in wrestling, for them to be like, oh yeah, 5 is piece of back with high amplitude. I'm like, what? If I were to share freestyle wrestling to a school in another state, it would probably not at all be the same thing, And we have so many talented coaches and former athletes who live here in New York City that were Olympians, world team members, were training for their national teams in their respective countries, that the culture of wrestling could be so great. And so it's just getting these people to get back into the sport, to dive back into Beat the Streets, into their local programs and provide that coaching opportunity, because there's so many talented people here. And it's a huge advantage. Not only do we have the advantage of we have a huge population here in New York City to draw an athletic base from, but we also have the advantage of all these talented people who experience high wrestling to be around the sport again.
Coming from Colorado Springs, where you really started to see some of the age group levels come up through the developmental programs, and you get them in the room for training camp for like a junior or cadet camp prior, and then now going to see the actual and work with the grassroots level, the impact that Beat the Streets New York and programs like it. It seems like that while Beat the Streets New York City is just one Beat the Streets element, it seems like it's kind of been the organization that's moved the needle when it comes to grassroots big events and kind of, making big splashes on things. I mean, how impactful has Beat the Streets New York been for the entire landscape of wrestling now that you've actually been there for almost a year and can kind of compare it to what you had seeing in Colorado Springs prior?
Yeah, I think Beat the Streets New York City has had the largest impact just because it's been here first. It's been here the longest. Started in 2006 and just has grown tremendously in size. And then once we grew in size, we started really targeting how do we make quality impact, and whether that's creating high-level competition and training environments and opportunities, or is it us providing internships, or us providing SAT prep, Regents test prep? Is it us creating those relationships that are going to be lifelong and creating an alumni network and all of those kinds of things? So I think in that regard, we are a trendsetter. And then I think another one of our great things here in Beat the Streets New York City is just the fact that we make wrestling so diverse, and we're constantly looking, how do we grow our numbers? How do we retain our numbers? How do we get them to matriculate from middle school wrestling to high school wrestling into collegiate wrestling opportunities? How do we connect those gaps? How do we create relationships? And then how do we do that in a large scale? It's one thing for one public school to go from 8 middle school wrestlers to 6 high school wrestlers, but how do you do that in thousands amongst 100 programs with different kids, different coaches, and then make it a sustainable system? Because wrestling has struggled to retain those athletes. It's also struggled to retain them for the length of the season. So if we can solve those problems here, and then we can send the resources and that information outward and start to grow wrestling and maintain that growth, I think that's where Beat the Streets makes its hugest impact. It not only diversifies who are the normal wrestlers here in New York, in the U.S., but it also provides this learning environment that we can all pull from and start to take back to our individual organizations and schools and really grow wrestling in our own respective areas.
What about the format? We're seeing at the national level, we've got national tournaments all over the place, and it's not just USA Wrestling or AAU or New Way or whatever's out there. There are tournaments everywhere, and you're seeing a lot of kids at younger ages getting toted around the country to try to win certain awards and things of that nature. What I've seen from New York City, and correct me if I'm wrong here with Beat the Streets, is the middle school and the high school and the Beat the Streets programs, there's a finite wrestling season, and it's not about grinding out 40 matches a year. It's an ample number of dual meets. It's a lot more practice. It's an activity. It's a sporting event. What are some things that you've seen about how the scheduling is put together and the methodology behind it to make sure kids are coming back? You're not getting that attrition. They're not getting burned out because they're, as you pointed out, kids are getting beat up 40 times a year. That may be 8 to 12 versus 40.
Right. And I'd have to say a huge part of that goes to our junior league director, Penn Godfrey. He does an amazing job of putting together a 12-week season where the kids are really wrestling every other week. And so they might do a Friday night match night, which we call family match nights, where they bring their friends and family. We line all the kids up on a wall and we say, the 4 kids next to you are going to be in your weight bracket. It's just a Madison weight bracket round robin. You sit with your friends who are in your weight bracket. You sit and talk with them. You wrestle and you enjoy the night. Quick in and out within 2 hours. And I think that's a big piece of it because parents don't want to sit for 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours for a tournament. And I think it's the same with our junior league tournaments themselves. We don't start until noon. We only do 2 major tournaments leading into their city championships, and it's always up to the kids whether they want to be a part of that. And so they don't get a ton of matches. What they leave this into the winter season feeling is that I want to wrestle again. And so that pushes them more into like this kind of hybrid season in the winter where they're doing a little bit more of the tournament, but it's their choice again. So if they want to just train, they can train. If they want to be a part of our competition season, they can be a part of that. And then we just involve them, whether it's inviting them to our neighborhood training centers with our high school kids to really create that relationship within our programming, or inviting them to our spring break, our winter break, our preseason camps, so they really get the feel of what the next level of wrestling looks like. But at the same time, they're given the structure of more games and more opportunities to relax and get to know each other as opposed to just grinding it out all day long. We really don't take our middle school kids to a lot of major competitions. They go to some regional ones where they can really have some success and fall in love with the sport. And that's really what our number one focus for them is, to fall in love with the sport. And I would say a large portion of our programming is only targeted towards teaching kids how to love what they do and have a healthy lifestyle and grow in their social emotional learning methods.
So how does this event, the Cliff King Gotham City Girls Open, coming up April 19th and 20th at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, how does that tournament factor into what you just talked about in freestyle, folk style? Just kind of give us some nuts and bolts on this tournament and some things that go behind it, because that's mainly the focus of this interview is, yes, the growth, but this tournament is what's coming up later this month in April, and so you can get the word out about this quality event.
Yeah. So for us, Gotham started as an event where we could just provide an opportunity for girls on the East Coast, especially our New York City girls, to wrestle. There's not a ton at that time, 6 years ago, that there were girl-centered events where they were given the platform and held on this pedestal and really showcased. And so that was the goal of Gotham, to make them feel important, but also to create this sense of community. Within the boys wrestling community, you can find the different state teams. You can find a million local regional clubs that you can work within. But within the girls, we were all kind of separate. And there was 2 or 3 girls here, 2 or 3 girls over here, and another one over there. And so what Gotham really did was it brought together a sense of community. And these girls look forward to seeing each other again. They travel, from nearby states to come in. And it also affords New York City girls the opportunity to wrestle those better girls. For us, we have to constantly pay to take our kids out of the city to wrestle talented athletes. And so for us to host an event where these talented athletes come to us and we start to see where our girls stand in comparison. And then that confidence helps us get to the All-American level at Fargo. It helps us get to that national team status within USA Wrestling's events like Women's Nationals and World Team Trials. And so for us, it's like, look at the community that you can create. Look at the opportunities that are available to you outside if you want to stay in this wrestling community. It's also a great opportunity for us to bring in college coaches, recruiters, to get a good look at our, 700 girls here in New York City. Because a lot of times they're overlooked because we don't get to take them all out of the city. And so getting them those next level opportunities and showcasing them, making them feel important, reminding them that it's all about growth. We have a free clinic Friday night after the kids tournament, where we have Lee James and Elena Pierskova, right? That's a world champ and a world bronze medalist, giving their time for free to help with young girls to create the sense of community, teach them about the sport and help them learn and enjoy it. So that's a big thing for me within Gotham. It's grown tremendously from 100 girls now to over 500. We have 4 countries who are coming to compete. It's going to continue to grow. We got 23 states competing. So for us, it's a huge opportunity for us to draw attention to girls wrestling. It's a huge opportunity for our girls to, meet people from different cultures, see how wrestling unites us all, and at the same time helps us diversify ourselves from the rest of the non-wrestling community.
One thing I've noticed from my multiple trips to Manhattan and the various boroughs, the 5 boroughs, is that when you grow up in New York City, there's a different worldview that a lot of people have. And then when people come into New York City, having not lived there before, their world's kind of turned upside down. And what you're dealing with is you've got kids that are going to go to college, and then they may end up in like Jamestown, North Dakota, or Marietta, Georgia, or Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. What have you noticed about in just a short time you've been there, the kids that are going on to high school, and then their world is being opened to that? Yes, there's, it's the crossroads of the world in New York City, but to go to a small place that's like, wow, the world is actually smaller and bigger all at the same time, and women's wrestling has given me that opportunity.
Yeah, the only world that they know is the world that they live in until they're exposed to something greater or something different, right? And so when we travel, we take time to stop at different colleges, to see the different sizes of schools, to see, anything and everything about a town. I grew up on a farm, so I take those things for granted. We're passing like soybean fields, and they're like, "What is that? Do we eat that?" And so educating them in that sense, because there isn't a soybean field here in Brooklyn or in Manhattan or in Queens, right? And so just exposing them to those things and realizing that they could survive in these kind of environments, and so giving them that freedom and a little bit of leadership to when we travel, to explore a little bit and to understand that culture or that diversity or that little microcosm of America. And letting them really decide, can I survive here? Because that's where they're going to have to survive. There isn't a big Division I school that's located in a major city where they feel is home, So helping them understand that, and then meeting people who are from that area makes them feel a little bit more comfortable, and it creates that relationship, because maybe this girl from Maine might be on a team with our girl from New York City who ends up down at Ferrum or ends up in Oklahoma City, and so that relationship matters. You have that pre-established relationship when you get there, and makes that feel a little bit more like home.
Yeah, way to drop the Virginia reference with Ferrum there. So of course, that is I've been to Ferrum. It's kind of out there a little bit in the I don't know if this is relevant. This is obviously not relevant to kids, but they call it the moonshine capital of the world down there in Franklin County. So that's the type of, you're going from Manhattan to moonshine capitals. That's kind of crazy. Now, as the relationship works,
is so diverse.
Yeah, it absolutely is. One thing is, the Beat the Streets New York chapter has really been, working with USA Wrestling with these big events. Mike Novogratz with the gala and such. Brendan Buckley. What's it like been working with Brendan here in the last couple, almost a year?
Yeah, Brendan's been a good leader to learn from. He spent some time here at Beat the Streets, so he has a real understanding of what's going on and how to best operate. And so it's nice to have somebody who has experience here in the city to bounce ideas off, because Stephen Keith and I are brand new here to the city, and we're still trying to figure out the system. And so he's been a good mentor and leader for our organization. He's just trying to do the best he can and have the greatest amount of impact. And I think one of the things I like most about Brendan is that he's always looking at other organizations to try and steal their best ideas, right? Because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just want to have a high quality impact. And so if we can do that by taking little pieces from this organization or asking this program or organization like Veronis to help us out to make those things happen, then we'd love to do that, right? Like our Veronis programming, right now they set up our SAT prep, our Regents test prep. They provide an internship for our kids. They teach life skills. And it's all from a tech company that has nothing to do with wrestling. But because of Brendan's relationship and Scott Beck also helping make that happen, we now have a great relationship with them, and our kids are better for it.
Scott Beck, patron of the network here and frequent listener of all the shows on the Mad Talk Podcast Network. And one thing that I want to point out is that what the kind of like the letter writing campaigns are? Because I know before you got there, I got a letter from an athlete. Her name was Ashley Oitak, and it took me like a year and a half or 2 years to actually respond. I had this handwritten letter in my desk, and I always said, I'm going to send it back. And I did send it back. I never got confirmation if she got it or not, because I think she ended up graduating and going to college somewhere. I don't think she wrestled, but it was one of those things where I got a handwritten letter from somebody from Beat the Streets talking about what wrestling had meant to them. And I don't know how many teenagers these days actually know how to sit down, address, and write a handwritten letter to somebody and explain it. So I thought that was one of the more powerful things that Beat the Streets has done. It's a life skill, but it's something that, we used to get taught that in like first, second grade. And now with all the text messaging and everything being digital, the written word seems to be going away, far and away from our kids growing up. I mean, what have you seen from those type of things that wrestling is giving them the opportunities? Okay, where else are they going to learn certain skills? Wrestling's putting that in front of them.
Yeah, it's impactful. That's another thing that Brendan does. We do it once a year. We sit down all of our kids in the middle of a training camp, and we write thank you letters to our donors and our sponsors and our partners, and say, we really appreciate it. This is what I learned from you. We did a call campaign at the end of the year where we just had a small handful of kids just making calls. And all their job was just to ask, what did you learn from wrestling as a donor? Why would you give to Beat the Streets? And how did that money impact me? And so it's a great skill. Another skill that we work on that I feel like we've been working on all year, but it's getting a lot better, is just shaking hands and introducing ourselves, making eye contact, saying thank you when somebody compliments us, and communicating in that kind of manner, because it's important. Right now, when I first got there, we would not introduce ourselves. We would just stare at somebody or sit in the back of the room instead of walking up and introducing ourselves, asking questions, making eye contact, really engaging with people. And I think that's a huge life skill. So I think all of those things, Beat the Streets does a really good job of creating this opportunity for kids to learn so much more than a single and a double leg. It's, creating that community within New York City. It's teaching them soft skills like leadership, confidence. At the end of every practice, they run the talk, breaking down the practice and breaking down how they could get better, or as the quote of the day, they break that down. What does that mean? And how is it impactful in wrestling, and how is it impactful in life? And those are things that are special. And whether they're directly related to our success on the mat or indirectly related to the fact that they might be successful years from now in their career, post-college, post-wrestling, it's important. And I'm glad that Beat the Streets takes the time to play a part in that. That's meaningful to me. Wrestling did so much for me, but I think the greatest thing it ever did for me was providing with so many different soft skills and the ability to really represent myself in a way that put me in a position to have opportunities, whether it was career-oriented or college or a relationship.
One thing I'm curious about is we see what Wyoming Seminary is doing with their elite program, the EAP out in Colorado Springs, what Kevin Black has done out in River Falls in bringing high-level training and, preparing for the next level. And it seems like a lot of the skills that those things are offering, you guys also offer with the local kids that Beat the Streets and the New York City area as a whole.
We do. So we provide high-level training opportunities. Right now we have a split practice system. So we have girls-only practices, we have boys-only practices, we have co-ed practices, we have high-level elite practices. And so we're trying to cater to the needs of every culture, because not everybody is so accepting of wrestling girls, or maybe it's just difficult for them, or maybe they're embarrassed, or whatever it is, or maybe they're ready for that next level of competition in that co-ed level practice where they can get great partners. And then that high level performing group where we're really oriented on getting not from on the podium, but to the top of the podium, and providing that specialized attention for them and making sure that they're just prepared. And so that's one thing that I think we do really well. And I think even next year, as we're getting ready to plan our new academy season, is looking at how do we level the practices and how do we provide opportunities for everyone to grow within their own current level of success and get to the next level, and encourage them to reach for that next level.
So as we go to that next level, let's combine the wrestling with the life skills. We've done that. We've got a big tournament coming up. I want to circle back to that tournament. That was probably the worst segue in the history of broadcasting, is how to try to bring it back to this tournament, because that's the big thing. You got the opportunity. Maybe there's going to be some of those SEM kids coming in. Maybe there's those kids that are on fall or spring break or something that are going to be in that area. So the development of this Gotham City Girls Open, is it kind of like almost like a mini version of a New York AC for a senior athlete type of event, something like that?
Yeah. And so like our girls are getting to meet high level competitors, right? But they're also getting to meet first day competitors. Every day when they go out for a job interview post graduation, they're going to be competing for those things. And if I walk into an interview and I'm nervous because this girl has an accolade that maybe I didn't have the opportunity to compete for in my past, and I give her too much credit and I put her up on a pedestal, then maybe I put myself in a position where I don't perform how I should to get that job. And so I think it's a huge skill, right? Whether it's the competitive side of it or the soft side of it, that indirectly is going to lead to success long term. And facing those confidence deficits and building that positive self-talk, meeting new people, introducing yourself to new people, and introducing yourself to college coaches, being vulnerable about wrestling in front of people that maybe you've never been around, and being willing to step up to that challenge, whether you win or lose. And so all of those things kind of contribute into this, what is Gotham City and how does it impact our kids? Because it's an opportunity that our girls wouldn't normally have the opportunity to have. We can't take 700 girls out of the city. We can't afford to do that. But what we can do is we can afford to host an event where we bring in another 300 to 400 girls where they really get the opportunity to have that experience.
I am curious on the transportation aspect because a lot of people don't have cars when they decide to move to the 5 boroughs here. So, what is the breakdown of, how many kids and parents will drive to these certain Beat the Streets or middle school spots, or is it all mass transit? I mean, that part of this whole thing baffles me. Even though I like Manhattan, I know how to use the subways and the taxis and such, it still baffles me if I were to do that as a kid.
This is crazy because these are the toughest kids I've ever met. And my mom would never let me do this, but because, it's not what I was exposed to. It's not what I was used to. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's unsafe because it's normal for them. But these kids have to get to school. And so they're leaving their house at 5, 6 in the morning to take public transit by themselves, maybe 1 or 2 trains to get to school by 7, to be in school until 3. They practice after school until 5 at their own individual program. Then they get on another train. They come see me at one of our neighborhood training centers. We have another practice. They get on that train and they commute back home. It's a long day. These kids are getting home at 9:30 from practice and they're exhausted. They still have to do their homework. They still have to take care of those kinds of things. But the fact that they can manage all of that is amazing. That makes our kids unlike everybody else in the rest of the country. They're so skilled at just managing their time. They're so skilled at commuting and making sure that they're at the right place. I get lost. I'm almost 30. These 15, 16-year-olds are telling me which way to turn and which train to get on, and that's incredible. I think, Pratt, who is hosting Gotham City, is located in a neighborhood where people should feel safe. It's a really nice old neighborhood, beautiful old buildings, a nice area. So it's within 10 minutes walking from downtown Brooklyn. So it's not a huge issue, but I think that is a fear of people who come into Gotham City is, oh no, now I have to use this public transit system when our kids are using it every day and they can navigate it so well.
And just so people understand the terminology, Gotham, that's something that as an outsider, explain what that is, because people think Batman when they think Gotham City, but what is Gotham as it means to you? What did you learn about that terminology and that name?
It's just tradition. It's what people think of when they think of New York City. The first thing that comes to me is Batman because I do like my comics. So, to me, it's just actually, if you look back at our very first logo, it is a bat and a silhouette for Gotham City. But it's just I can't even find words right now, Jason. I'm sorry. It's a city that lives at night, and it thrives at night, and it's an amazing city. It's honestly been a cool experience to live here, but I'm so excited for these people to come in and be able to experience New York City, experience the amount of people that are commuting every which way and the most diverse cultures that walk past you that nobody else is looking at. But because you're not used to it, you're like, what in the world just walked past me? And there's so many things that just contribute to this overall factor. And I think Gotham really sums up what New York City is, and then it kind of just provides and it's iconic, and we are blessed to have Cliff Keen as a top sponsor to go along with Gotham City. And I think Cliff Keen has done a great job of being our first major sponsor and has stuck with us for all these years and really and truly believed in supporting Gotham and that it was an important experience for everyone.
You can find more about this event at btsny.org if you want to contact Emma about how to get how to get into this event. You can also go to the website there. There's information there. Or Randall, that's with 2 L's, at btsny.org. Emma, the time we got left, you are still the only woman who is a gold level certified coach for USA Wrestling. That's still got to make you feel pretty good inside, right?
Yeah, it's always nice. But hopefully we can keep moving and growing, and there'll be a lot more girls who are signed up under that list as well. So I'm excited for the future of girls wrestling. I'm super excited to see all these young women who are now wrestling to become coaches and really advance our sport forward. And hopefully they too can get to that gold level certification.
Anything else you want to add about your experiences so far in New York or the Gotham City Girls Open coming up again April 19th and 20th, Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York City?
No, I just want to say thanks for your time and all your effort and coverage, and really appreciate all that you do.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MattTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to this show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed and you already listen and you love the show and you want to support this show and this network, MattTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.